Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Adara Goldberg, and I am the Executive Director of the Holocaust Resource Center, Diversity Council, and the Human Rights Institute here at Kean University in Union, New Jersey. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the third in a series of programs the Diversity Council is presenting in collaboration with the New Jersey Association of Professional Mediators. This session is entitled The Importance of Educational Support Professionals and Their Role in Conflict Resolution, 5 Foundational Pillars. Our relationship with the NJAPM goes back more than 2 years now, when we both identified this need for reaching education professionals at various levels of schools in the K-12 system, who all encounter very similar challenges through different lenses. One of the goals of our work at the Diversity Council is to provide ongoing support for K-12 educators, administrators, and support professionals, such as those of you who are here with us right now. And our goal is to create equitable, accessible, and culturally sensitive content that can reach a variety of audiences. And so it's such a pleasure to be able to partner, with NJAPM and to bring together our mutual goals and talents to provide this type of training program for all of you today. And so with that, I'm going to turn things to Suzanne English, who can provide an introduction from the association. Suzanne?
Adara, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And we are all thrilled to be here. The New Jersey Association of Professional Mediators is honored to co-host this, and the importance of the educational support professionals and their roles in conflict resolution. It fits right into our mission, which is to foster public awareness of mediation as the preferred method of dispute resolution, provide information to the public about mediators that meets our standards for accreditation, protect the public through standards of conduct for our mediators, and act as a training, educational and collegial resource for mediators in New Jersey. We also recognize the importance of conflict resolution and how the educational support professionals are the early people to use this method, and can really, hopefully you'll learn something today. I think it's a great program, and I'm looking forward to watching it with the rest of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Adara. And my name is Lawrence Jones, and I'm the chair of the NJAPM's Cultural Competency Committee. I'm a former Superior Court judge from the state of New Jersey, retired from public service a few years ago, and I'm involved at the university level in certain faculty positions. This particular program today, we're really excited about it in terms of our ongoing partnership with Kean University in focusing on something which may not get as much attention as it should, which is the possibility of education support professionals known as ESPs basically participating in different types of conflict resolution that takes place in a school environment. The name of the program today is The Importance of Education Support Professionals and Their Roles in Conflict Resolution, 5 Foundational Pillars. I'm going to screen share for a second here. And you'll see we have 5 foundational pillars that our various participants are going to speak about today. Number 1 is mental health issues within the school community. Number 2 is cultural sensitivity and awareness of implicit bias. Number 3 is recognizing bullying and its potential impact. Number 4 is understanding the psychology of respect. And number 5 is restorative justice and dispute resolution models. What is, in fact, an ESP? And the National Education Association has basically defined 9 different categories, as you can see here on the orange slide. Number 1, clerical service workers. Number 2, custodial and maintenance ESPs. Number 3, food service workers. Number 4, health and student services. Number 5, para-educators. Number 6, security services. Number 7, skilled trades. Number 8, technical services. Number 9, transportation services. Now, while these are all very diverse job descriptions, what they all have in common is they are all part of the school community and they are not teachers or administrators. There tends to be a focus sometimes on how teachers and administrators can become involved with dispute resolution and improving programs for dispute resolution in the school. But there's a whole body of additional members of the school population, the ESPs, who can also participate and can also be very helpful to help students and to help faculty as well. This comes from the National Education Association, Population of Education Support Professionals. According to the NEA, ESPs comprise over 2 million members in public schools and colleges, making up approximately 1/3 of the entire public education workforce. And more than 2.2 million ESPs are in the nation's public schools. Of these, an estimated 43% work at the preschool, kindergarten, or elementary school level. So this means there's a huge untapped resource, a population within the school environment that could, with appropriate training and backing, be very helpful in dispute resolution. This is a statement on the purple slide here from the National Association of State Boards of Education, and this is a quote. Schools are facing major challenges: staff shortages, student trauma, opportunity gaps, and students' sense of disconnection from their schools. ESPs are an untapped resource for addressing these challenges. They should be included in whole child policies and practices designed to improve students' educational experiences, and state boards are in a position to champion them as partners. So this is really our focus for today's presentation. We've previously have worked with Kean University in speaking with administrators. We've spoken with teachers. Now we want to address the ESPs because we really believe that they are a very, very vital resource that can be used for major programs regarding dispute resolution in the school. I mentioned the 5 foundational pillars. The first one is on mental health, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Joni Jones, who's going to address pillar number 1. Joni, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Larry. My name is Joni Jones, and I have been a nurse for over 45 years. I am board certified in mental health and psychiatric nursing. I'm also a certified anger management specialist, and I also am a mediator. So today we're going to talk about conflict resolution. And it's a process of ending a dispute by reaching an agreement that, satisfies all persons that are involved. But being aware of your communication can be very helpful during this process. So recognizing and understanding the student's feelings is very important because feelings are not right. They're not wrong. Nobody can tell somebody how they feel. Describing the perceived problem while sharing positive intentions can also be helpful. So what I mean by that is you can say to them, I see, that you're very upset. Let's talk about this and see what I can help you with. So you take something negative and turn it around into a positive. It's important for active listening. You want to clarify and summarize what was said, because you want to make sure that there's no misunderstandings, and that you are all on the same page. So understand the student's expression without bias. And Anju is going to talk more about that in a little bit. So when we build trusting relationships, why are they so important? Because working together to find a resolution is so important, because not finding closure can spark trauma, unhealthy coping, and many times we see risky behaviors like going to alcohol or drugs, or even going into dysfunctional relationships. And some people go to gangs just for acceptance. It can really impact a student's overall quality of life. And it's really no secret that there's a public outcry. More has to be done about mental health, drug addiction, and early diagnosis of disorders in our youth, because those associated undesirable behaviors can promote an array of conflicts in any school setting. So schools do play an important role when our focus is on our youth. As an ESP, you might be focused on your job task and may not realize how similar your roles can be with one another. how you can stop undesired escalations in students and how each one of you can impact students' potentials, their quality of life and future, one student at a time. And each one of you can become a requested support person in the conflict resolution process. And Larry's going to talk about that a little bit later. So to understand how unresolved conflicts can affect students, I feel that looking at the general statistics can be a real eye-opener. For example, 1 out of 4 people in the United States are diagnosed with a mental health condition. And 1 out of 6 youths ages 6 to 17 experiences anxiety, depression, or ADHD. And this isn't including the people that are underdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. What's really shocking is that over 50,000 Americans completed the task of suicide in 2023. And the CDC, the suicide rate, ages 10 to 24, has increased 62% from 2007 to 2021. That's about 11 per 100,000. And it wouldn't be surprising to see those numbers be much higher now in 2024. But I think we can all agree that one life lost by suicide is just one too many. And when I talk about, just think about an age that you think is the youngest person that had completed the task of suicide. Because there was a little girl that was from Oregon, and she told her parents that she was going to go in her room and kill herself. She closed the door. By the next time that those parents opened up the door, that little girl was deceased. She was 6 years old. If anyone is ever saying that they are suicidal, if there's something that we can learn from this very heartfelt situation, is that when somebody threatens suicide, they are never to be ignored and never to be left alone. So how can you help? Well, you know, nurses have a slight advantage. They are actually voted the most trusted profession in the United States in probably about 22, 23 years in a row. And their office is often looked at as a safe haven. You don't feel well, you go there, you know someone's going to listen, you're going to feel good when you go out, whether you go home or back to your classroom. So there's an advantage in that. But building positive relationships of trust and confidence, we know helps provide a safe and secure environment for students, and it doesn't matter what your role is. Relationships should start before any incidents or crisis occurs. Nurses, as well as anybody else, can stand in the hallway, greet students, naturally compliment, positively reinforce the desired behaviors, introduce themselves if they're not known, and remind them that their door is always open. Students might visit the nurse with somatic responses. And what I mean by that is a person can present with physical symptoms. They can have a migraine, they can have a stomach ache, they can be throwing up, but it's not caused by a bacteria or a virus. It's caused by anxiety. So once you're able to decrease the anxiety, you see those symptoms go away. Now, natural conversations, I always look at, can become very therapeutic. And what I mean by that is how you ask your questions. Open-ended questions are better than closed yes or no questions, because if you say you're not feeling well, they might just say, yep, nope, and that's the end of the conversation. But when you say, tell me about how you are feeling, then they open up, and then you might find a whole slew of information that you would never have known about if you didn't ask that simple, open-ended question. And some students, they just visit because they need emotional support. They may have experienced a traumatic event. They might have lost a loved one. They might have lost a pet. They might be a product of being bullied, and Felicia is going to get more into that a little later on. But when talking to a student about a traumatic event, it's more important that you show that you care. Don't get stuck on, is this the right thing I say, or is this the right thing not to do, or whatever? Just be caring and be honest. And that's what they need. They need to understand in a language of what their age is. So you want to, even developmentally, you want to come down where they can understand what you're saying. Allow them to ask questions, but be very patient if a student asks the same question over and over again. The important thing is to be consistent in your answer so that you don't confuse them. And if you don't know the answer, admit it, but reassure them that you're going to go and find out. And if a student stops talking, embrace the silence. There's so many people that just don't feel comfortable in conversations when they become silent, but this is a very important time because when somebody's experiencing a traumatic event, it's best not to force the conversation, as this can trigger them to relive the situation. So there might be one event, but when it plays over and over, they could now have 50, traumatic events. And avoid saying things like be brave or don't cry, because it's more important to reassure them that it's okay to feel the way that they do when something bad or scary happens. This is what builds the trust, and this is what fosters communication. And if any of them go into a panic attack, just remember that we have like primitive imitation skills. And you can actually have them focus and look at you, and you can mimic some slow, deep breathing and tell them to follow, because that will stimulate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system that will help calm all of the anxiety that they're feeling. So as an advocate for individuals with disabilities, I recommend becoming competent in the signs and symptoms of various disorders. An example of that is ADHD, oppositional defiance, and because they can be an underdiagnosis for something bigger like autism spectrum disorders, and students with autism can easily be targeted for bullying. So learning strategies to become an effective listener can help you in this expanded role to help the students, and becoming cultural sensitive and being aware of your own biases. So I just want to take a second to thank you all for all you do for the students in our community. And I have submitted material here that expands a lot more on what I said here. And I do want to thank you for all that you do. Anju?
Thank you, Joni. And it is so good that the school nurses serve as a safe harbor for children. Each school is supposed to have an anti-bullying specialist. And I think that some of the conversations that the nurses have can be shared with the, with that specialist. So I'm going to talk about the second pillar, which is the recognition of implicit bias and cultural sensitivity. I took this from the NJA website, who is a educational support professional. It's clearly the people who are sitting here today watching this. And it's a broad array of people with different skills. But the idea is that it is, as Joni said, not just the teachers, not just the administrators. You are the eyes and ears of a lot of students. And one of the benefits is oftentimes you're invisible to them, and you will be seeing things that teachers don't see. There's behavior on the bus that's different from the teacher who grades the student. A lunch person is going to see different behavior, who sits with whom, who's excluded. So you are very important to this process. I found this great quote about the invisible staff members who are in the school every day helping the child who's sitting alone in the lunchroom or getting bullied in the hallway. The invisible workers in your environment might be the very patient and kind colleagues down the hall who always help you with your computer issues, or the kind-hearted colleague who senses that you need an extra hand with a project or performance and just jumps in to help without even being asked. Maybe the invisible people at your school help with translating or staff writing projects. Then they are the janitors and ground crews who are often overlooked, even though they work very hard and for long hours. These are just a few examples. The list goes on and on. And oftentimes you hear stories about people when they look back on in high school and ask, who did you admire when you went to high school? It's often a support professional that's spoken about, right? Someone who wasn't judgmental, wasn't giving a grade or making the cut or choosing who was on the team or not on the team. So I think it's an important point. So I'm going to switch to the idea of biases because we have children in a school system, and Joni talked about the idea of they have feelings, and oftentimes there are explicit biases where there are prejudices against them, overt racism, comments, and so forth. But I think what's even harder is those implicit biases, the subconscious feelings and stereotypes that people may have towards them that affects them even more, right? People who say, I don't see color, I don't see religion. Of course, we're all different. And to say that you don't see it, they're seeing it every day when they're the other in the room. So we'll talk a little bit more about those subconscious feelings and stereotypes we have that influence and may be imprinted in us. And we'll talk about some examples and how we work on our biases. One of the resources I really love, and I'm going to share this and show you a video, Tiffany Taylor Smith of the University of Dayton has a very brief 1.5-minute video saying what is implicit bias. So let's watch the video, and I'd like it if afterwards, when you're sharing your conversations with your coworkers, talk about what you thought about the video.
We all have implicit bias. These unconscious biases that we carry are influenced by our life experiences and the messages we are given, either intentionally or unintentionally, about ourselves and others. These messages are unconscious because they are not at the forefront of our thoughts. They're stored in the amygdala, a small portion of the brain with the primary purpose of protecting us from danger. If I'm walking to my car at night and I see someone approaching, my amygdala is going to react quickly to try to assess how safe I am. Our brain places people into categories based on outward appearances, and those stereotypes allow our amygdala to quickly size up our situation. We're using stored information from life experiences, but those stereotypes are not always accurate. This is not limited to dangerous situations. At work, we might react to people differently without even thinking about how our stereotypes might be influencing our actions. To overcome these biases and limit their impact, we should try to pay attention to the judgments and perceptions we have about people. We can add new information to our brain's memory by interacting with different groups of people, be open to sharing, and be patient with ourselves and others. We all have implicit biases. That's just the way our brain works. By making an effort to notice when our biases influence our unconscious judgments of others, we can strive to minimize the impact our biases have on our beliefs and actions.
First of all, in our multicultural world, having knowledge of our own prejudice and blind spots makes our interactions with others more effective. And we all know that New Jersey is one of the most diverse states, and our interactions with diverse students can be enhanced with greater knowledge of our own bias. So how do you actually assess your biases? And these are subconscious. So, if we knew them, we'd address them, but oftentimes we don't. The Harvard Implicit Bias Test has numerous tests on all different issues: age, weight, transgender, disability, and so forth. And you can take these tests free on the internet at the Implicit Harvard site. And I actually found one that was kind of interesting in your view on presidents. And part of the way you take the test is you're pressing E for bad, I for good, and they switch this around. And after a while, you're not completely in control consciously of what you're clicking. And so this is how the test is done. Here's an interesting article that I saw. The judiciary wants to question jurors about their racial and ethnic biases. So we know what our prejudices are because they're overt. But how can you ask or question implicit biases? Don't ask, test. And I think that's what the court should be doing, to really understand what people's subconscious views are on bias. I'm going to talk a little more about diversity and some of the definitions that you will hear. Diversity is the presence of differences. It can be race, it can be religion, it can be nationality, sexual orientation, but it's the idea that we're not all the same. Equity is promoting justice and fairness across these differences, and inclusion is really making people feel welcome. And this is the key to, in a sense, overcoming the biases, is when everyone feels that they have a seat at the table and they're welcome. Some examples of differences in cultures that are very interesting, and I'll talk about the first one, eye contact. In the West, people are taught to look in the eyes. Averting eyes signifies a lack of sincerity. But in Japan, constant eye contact is considered rude. So if you're talking and someone's giving a presentation to a class, think about a public speaking class, and you're grading the student that they didn't make eye contact. Well, in Japan, they actually were being polite. In China, it's polite to decline a gift when it's offered multiple times. And gifts are not opened in the giver's presence. So if you are dealing with a population, or you're going to a birthday party or child's birthday party, and there's a gift giving, and you're upset that they didn't open the gift, maybe that's the answer. In Scandinavia, silence is golden. People don't appreciate small talk. They want that silence, and small talk is frowned upon. Americans are when they travel overseas, wanting to talk all the time, smile, look people in the eye. But a lot of people, when you're traveling, you might think that they're unfriendly, but they're just have different norms. In Arab countries, it's normal for same-sex friends to hold hands. That's very unusual in the United States. So you may have a student in your class, a young boy, who wants to hold hands with his friends, and may not understand that that's different in the United States, but it's a norm where he's coming from. In Japan, students help to clean their schools. At the 15 minutes at the end of the day, they use brooms and vacuums, cloths to clean the bathrooms and other school spaces. So here's a question. When you go to someone's house, how do you feel about taking your shoes off at their houses, right? That's pretty normal. Certainly in Indian culture, my husband is Estonian, and his culture, I think oftentimes it comes as a surprise to people when they're asked to do that. But instead of getting upset, embrace the difference. There may be some benefits to what other people are doing. Being aware that cultural differences and similarities exist without assigning a value is cultural sensitivity. Things aren't better or worse. They are different in different places. Being aware that cultural differences exist between people and influence values, learning, and behavior. And cultural sensitivity is a set of skills that allows you to understand and learn about people whose background is not the same as your own. So how do you become more culturally sensitive? Try to not look at people on one dimension, age, race. Think about us. We're all made up of multiple variables. We grew up in different neighborhoods. We went to different schools. We have different professions. These are all unseen to the naked eye. But when we judge people on the variable of Black versus white, we're oftentimes making mistakes. Learn by asking. Don't be afraid to ask people of different cultures why they do certain things. Why do you eat this food? Why don't you eat this food? What days are holy to you? What days do you choose not to work? Make local connections. Find local organizations that work with different cultural groups. Pay attention to nonverbal behaviors. Oftentimes you can see people becoming uncomfortable, but they may not say what's making them uncomfortable. and exchange stories. Storytelling is a great way to share experiences that go beyond culture. You know, who did you admire when you were growing up and why? These cross many cultures. So becoming culturally aware takes time, but it also takes an open mind. And there's some information about me. I am a divorce mediator. I have offices in Hoboken and Clinton. I grew up in Glen Ridge, New Jersey. I was born and raised in England. I moved here in 1970 at age 12. And my mother's a special education teacher and my brother's a special education teacher. And I also teach mediation. Thank you so much. The next speaker is Alicia Farber. She's going to be talking about recognizing bullying and its potential impact.
My presentation today is on bullying, cyberbullying, and their potential impact. Before I begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an attorney, mediator, arbitrator, and author. I started my career as an electrical and computer engineer before I went into the legal field, and I worked as a trial attorney in New York City. And I did that for many years. Then I moved out to New Jersey and I focus my practice on dispute resolution. I've always had a passion for the arts, and over the past few years, I've combined the different aspects of my background to write contemporary young adult novels about the social, emotional, and legal impact of modern technology on our teens and tweens. I'm going to quickly share my screen with you because I have a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, with all of the technological advancements that we've made as a society, there are downsides such as bullying and cyberbullying. They've grown worse and become a major problem for school-age children. Today, I'm going to speak with you about their impact and what you can do to help combat them. Bullying isn't new. People have been bullying each other for generations. Essentially, bullying is when somebody repeatedly hurts someone else on purpose. It can be physical, like pushing, punching, kicking, shoving, or calling somebody mean names, spreading rumors, stealing or breaking their property, or leaving them out of activities on purpose. Who are these bullies? These are kids who are usually stronger. They have more friends or more money, or some other type of power over the children that are being bullied. Psychology today calls bullying an epidemic that is not showing signs of improvement. In fact, nearly 14% of public schools report that bullying is a disciplinary problem that occurs daily or at least once a week. The percentage of students who've experienced bullying at school in the last couple of years has been around 22.6 to 25%. That's really high. That's 1 out of every 4 kids. And research has shown that bullying and harassment in schools tends to increase during late childhood and peak in early adolescence, specifically during middle school. You can see that this is borne out by these statistics. Reports of bullying are highest in middle schools at 28%, followed by high schools 16%, combined schools 12%, and primary schools 9%. Where is this bullying occurring? 39% of students 12 to 18 reported that the most common locations for bullying were in the hallway or the stairwells. 26% said it was the cafeteria, and 20% said it's outside on school grounds. So you can see that most of these incidents are outside of the classroom in unstructured settings. So it's important for every educational support professional to be on the lookout for this bullying, to recognize the signs and to intervene, whether it's on the bus, the hall, the locker room, or even at an after-school activity. What are bullying behaviors? It's getting into fights, having friends that are bullies, being very competitive and aggressive and overly concerned with popularity and reputation, frequently getting into trouble, having new possessions and extra money, and not taking responsibility for their actions and blaming others. Technology has expanded the reach of bullying and the harm it causes. Traditional bullying and cyberbullying are closely related because those who are bullied at school are bullied online, and those who bully at school bully online. Last year, the most common forms of cyberbullying were posting mean or hurtful comments. That was 77.5%. Over 70% were spreading rumors. Embarrassing or humiliating somebody online was also about 70%. Intentionally excluding someone from a group text or chat, over 66%. And repeatedly contacting someone by text or online after they told you to stop was over 55.5%. Mean comments are made through social media posts, gaming, email, snaps, tweets, photo sharing sites, videos, hate accounts, and through impersonations. The results of cyberbullying can be extremely devastating because of its unique aspects. Online, a bully's actions can quickly turn viral and reach a large number of people, and it's easy for others to participate in it and to witness it. And once those hurtful posts are out there in the world, there's a permanent public record of them, and they can cause damage to reputations and long-term harm. 1 in 5 tweens say they've experienced cyberbullying in some form. Either they've been cyberbullied, they've witnessed it, or they're the cyberbullier. Reports of cyberbullying are the highest in middle schools at 33%, followed by high schools 30%, combined schools 20%, and primary schools 5%. Why is it so important to learn about cyberbullying? Because the impact on children can be severe, and they can bring their hurt and humiliation and their fear and anxiety into school. Many of the things that Joni was just talking about. 94% of tweens who were cyberbullied said it negatively impacted their life in some way. Now look at the high percentages of how it affected their feelings about themselves, their ability to learn and feel safe at school, their friendships, their physical health, and their schoolwork. 10% said they had to skip school at least once in the last year because they'd been cyberbullying. It's tied to low esteem, anxiety, depression, family problems, academic problems, school violence, and suicidal thoughts and attempts. Research has shown that both targets and aggressors suffer from psychological distress. So that's really important to be aware of, that it's not just the victims, but it's also the offenders who are dealing with a lot of these psychological problems that result. Cyberbullying is increasing, unfortunately. Studies have shown that there's a steady increase over time, which is not surprising considering the popularity of social media. Social media platforms are typically the vehicles for the cyberbullying. This slide shows the results of a national survey of middle and high school students. And it's in the last 30 days, showing you how they've been victimized in school and cyberbullied. And you could see from 2007, we're going from 10.4% to 26.5% last year, which is a really troubling trend. And the National Crime Victimization Survey, as you can see, shows that we're on this upward trend that does not seem to be letting up. There are many risk factors for kids to be targeted, unfortunately, like being seen as weak or different, having learning or visible disabilities, being depressed or anxious, having a few friends. So this is where we're getting into the diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Who isn't different? Everybody can be perceived as being different in some way. According to the Pew Research Center, 59% of US teens have been bullied or harassed online. Most have experienced abusive behavior in the form of name calling, false rumors, or they've received physical threats, and they all say it's a major problem for people their age. 87% of teens have observed cyberbullying, and the highest percentage of young people who were cyberbullied, who cyberbullied others, were only 13 years old. And the victims of cyberbullying were also 9 times more likely to be victims of identity fraud. The most common online targets are females and LGBTQ+. Studies have found that girls are more likely than boys to be both the perpetrators and the victims of cyberbullying. Over 20% of bullying victims are high school girls with different skin colors. Multiracial females have the highest risk of being victimized by bullies. Those who identify as LGBTQ+ are also more likely to experience cyberbullying and hate speech. 42% have reported they've experienced some form of online harassment, and 58% say they've been victims of hate speech at least once. There's also increased risk for people with special needs becoming victims. For children with disabilities, 75%, that's huge, with physical defects have been cyberbullied, and 52% with learning problems. Some of the ways that have become common for teens and tweens to cyberbully are through sexting, revenge porn, and sextortion. Sexting is sending or receiving sexually explicit material over cell phones, computers, and electronic devices. Revenge porn has become very popular. It's basically non-consensual pornography, sending out sexually explicit images or video of people without their consent. And sextortion. This, believe it or not, has become a big problem for adolescents in middle school. When someone gets a hold of a nude picture or a video of the victim, they blackmail them with it. They threaten to send it to everyone they know if they don't give them more sexually graphic images, money, or perform sexual favors. Sexting is a big problem for teens and tweens because whenever a sexual image of a minor is taken or shared, even consensually, child pornography laws are violated, and these kids can be charged as felons. Statistics show that over half of teens have sent nude or semi-nude photos of themselves to others, and 2/3 have received them. All of this behavior constitutes the creation, distribution, and possession of child pornography. This has become such a huge problem that I have written a book about it called Ice Queen. It's a contemporary young adult novel about dating and the digital age. If you're interested, I included a chapter in the materials where my main character learns that she's been cyberbullied on social media. My story is basically a fictionalized version of what's happening to bullying victims in real life. If you're interested in learning more, please see my website. And if you'd like to learn more about my next book, Fake Out, coming out May of 2024, and be on my newsletter, please leave me a message on my contact page. Fake Out is about a type of artificial intelligence known as deep fakes that's just become famous because it just happened to Taylor Swift. I call it the ultimate cyberbullying. It's where someone can take your voice and your image and make a new version of you doing whatever they want. I'd like to leave you today with some ways that you can combat bullying and cyberbullying. The first is to be observant. Be on the lookout for it. Outside the classroom, kids might not realize that you're paying attention to what they're doing and saying, and you can be the first line of defense for the victim. Recognize the warning signs. Kids maybe are losing interest in things that regularly matter to them. They're being unusually secretive. They seem withdrawn or depressed. They're leaving school early or missing school, or their academic performance is suffering. Be supportive. Cultivate an open, candid line of communication with the students so that they feel comfortable reaching out when something is wrong and when they're experiencing something distressing. Let them know that you're always there to chat with them about anything they see or experience online. You want them to be comfortable turning to you if there's a crisis. Encourage students to report in-school and online abuse. Victims of bullying should not feel that they're alone and suffer in silence. They should be supported and heard, so help them to empower themselves, and stand up for themselves. They need to know that their reports of bullying aren't ignored, and the school staff and counselors are taking an active role to help them. Also, resolve bullying as quickly as possible because that makes it less likely for it to continue. And in some cases, it can be the difference between life and death. Coach and counsel. Children who witness bullying and cyberbullying or who are victims typically don't know what to do or say. They're afraid they'll make the problem worse, and they don't know how to report it. They need to be coached, and they need to be taught steps to make themselves less vulnerable to cyber attacks. Training. You need to know how to respond appropriately to bullying without making the situation worse, which means get trained on bullying prevention and what to do if you see or learn that a child is a victim. Be part of cultural change. Help to promote a culture of mutual respect, tolerance, and appreciation for diversity. Even if you don't realize it, children are watching you and they're modeling your behavior. So it's important to demonstrate for them to treat others with empathy, kindness, and respect. I've included some resources if you'd like to find additional information, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us and watching this important video. All right, Ken.
Well, thank you. Hard to follow these great speakers. We have so much material here, and I'm taking it all in again. What we've learned today, and what do we do? And it occurred to me that ESPs are really, in most instances, the school personnel who are most likely to observe bullying, for example. People may behave one way in front of the teacher, that's kind of obvious, but less so that way in the cafeteria, and less so on the school bus, and less so in the yard. So we really have ESPs really thinking about this. And I had a personal reference, personal memory when I'm hearing all this about what happens, particularly in the cafeteria. I remember in high school, and I think we can all ask this question, when someone in the cafeteria dropped a tray, what was the response of the other students in the cafeteria? Does everyone have the same memory that I have, and why I got that memory? And the memory was that people started cheering and clapping. People didn't go over and help the person clean up the tray. People instead started clapping and cheering. Fortunately, I never dropped a tray in high school, but I can imagine now what the person who dropped that tray felt like. It's all around us. Bullying is all around us. When we talk about respect issues in school, what are respect? And by the way, no one told kids in high school you shouldn't do that. I never heard any teacher or cafeteria person say that. No, it went without saying. I later understood that when in camps, when people sleepaway camps, the same thing happened. So this behavior has been going on for a while. And where does it come from? Where does this come from? How do we learn respect? And it's fairly clear, I think, that this is something that we first learn in our own families. We learn about respect. We learn then about it at a very young age in school. We learn about it on the playground. We learn about it, and all of us who work in the schools are part of the mission is to help teach respect. Every opportunity, and I'm hearing all this makes me rethink it. I see there's a school, a private school right across from my office, and I go out when kids are leaving school, and I see the behavior that kids have, and I do find myself sometimes saying something. See something, say something. I find myself when I see behavior, and it's out there all the time, and we see it, and we see it as ESPs all the time, and I think we have to start what I would call promoting positive behavior. And I don't know that we're doing that as much as we should be doing it or thinking about it. We then need to have clear expectations and consequences. There needs to be consequences when we want to teach respect and when we don't see respect being followed through. We need to build positive relationships between students and staff. And I think the whole school community has to do this in particular. And I don't know how ESPs see the teaching staff. Again, I'm going back to my memories, my own memories. And I didn't get a sense that the teaching staff was teaching respect to the ESPs. We also, the implicit bias test, for people who haven't taken it, it's a fascinating test. We need to be aware of our cultural responses and how we respond to people in different cultures and how important it is not to make fun of people. And again, as ESPs, we witness this all the time. And as we spoke about today, conflict resolution and mediation. We need to have built into our schools conflict resolution. And we started this practice in schools 30 years ago. There was a whole big movement in school mediations. I was involved with it, and there was funding for it. And I don't know what happened to it. Maybe someone can find out what happened to that. It's not being done nearly to the extent that it was done when it first came out. We now have to also have parent and community involvement. We need to bring everyone into these issues, and we need to work as a team. And what we should be doing, I think some of the statistics that Felicia was saying, I mean, they're mind blowing. I mean, the fact that many, I've heard it before, and I read it even, and it's hard to picture that the percentages could be that high. It is really, it's hard to believe. And what are we doing about it? I mean, we all have to be doing something about it, and we have to have someone, sue a school district because of what happens to their daughter, as a result of bullying, for example. And we have to be monitored. We can't just go through, oh, this is great, nice presentation, we'll do something. And then a year later, it just kind of falls out. It's not funded. No one pays attention. Something new is out there. We need continuous monitoring and evaluation in every school district, in every state. And we really have, if we're going to make a change, we're part of making the change here at NJAPM. And we want to see real change. And we can't just do a program like this and then another one and then just let it go. We need a permanent task force to deal with all of this. This is something that we're going to have to be very committed to. And again, of course, we have to look at all of the aspects of this in our whole community, in our families. But we spend a lot of time in school, and the school personnel and ESPs in particular, I think, really need to have meetings. Is there a monthly staff meeting that teachers have monthly meetings they have to attend? Do ESPs have a monthly meeting that they have to attend where there's a speaker and there's discussion? And perhaps NJAPM can help in setting that up. Again, we're all in this together. And of course, the national mood is such that we see things on the news every day and we don't see a lot of respect. So this is a societal issue. It's in our schools, and we're here to help make it better for all of us. Thank you, and I'm now going to let Lawrence Jones speak, and in a sense, put some closure as well on today's presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you to all of our speakers today so far. We've dealt with 4 of the foundational pillars. 1 was mental health, 2 was cultural competency and sensitivity, 3 was bullying and anti-bullying, 4 was the psychology of respect. And the 5th pillar I'm going to talk about a bit now is what's known as restorative justice, which is a concept that's taking on more and more popularity in schools throughout the country, as well as in other types of forums. And it kind of brings together, to some degree, the other 4 pillars which we talked about in terms of how professionals, including ESPs, might become engaged in dispute resolution through restorative practices or through other similar types of practices. And so, first of all, you may have heard the term restorative justice or restorative practices. Restorative justice essentially is a form of alternative dispute resolution. What that means is it is a concept on how to potentially resolve a dispute between two or more people. And in schools, as we've been talking about throughout the day today, there are very often disputes which take place between students, either as a result of bullying, cultural insensitivity, etc. And so very often it becomes very important for school districts to have a program in place on how to attempt to resolve disputes before they spiral and go out of control. So restorative justice is one way to do that. And restorative justice essentially, can't get into a whole program about it today, but in a few minutes, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview. Restorative justice essentially, by its title, it's designed to restore what somebody has lost. So for example, if somebody is being bullied, let's say student A is bullying student B, and student B is having a lot of, emotional consequences as a result. They feel picked on, they feel bullied, etc. That in the context of restorative justice, of a restorative justice proceeding, it's designed potentially to make the person who has been bullied feel more whole, feel restored, and to end the bullying, if it can be done, and also perhaps to gain some understanding as to why the person doing the bullying is in fact bullying, especially at the school level when everyone is in their formative years, and whatever takes place in school can have an impact on their life as an adult later on. And so there are different structures to restorative justice. There's a lot of room for creativity and innovation. It's basically a field that's still developing. But some of you may have heard the term mediation. And obviously the name of this organization is New Jersey Association of Professional Mediators. And we spend a lot of time talking about mediation and practicing mediation. But there are some subtle differences between mediation and restorative justice. There could be. And I want to just explain what some of those differences may be. Mediation essentially is bringing two people together. For example, let's say they're in court against each other and there's some boundary dispute between neighbors and they're suing each other for whatever reason. And in mediation, it's an attempt to try to resolve the dispute between the parties without getting into necessarily who's right and who's wrong, and trying to reach a resolution without it going to trial. You could also have mediation in a school setting where you have two students who it's not really clear who's right or who's wrong, that type of thing, and they're having an issue with each other and they try to resolve the issue through mediation. And mediation can be very helpful and very practical in a lot of circumstances. There's a strong public policy supporting dispute resolution in most courts throughout the country. Restorative justice, however, takes it really to a kind of a different place and a different level. In restorative justice, there may be, in some instances, a need to focus on when somebody has done something wrong, such as bullying. Why is that important? Because really twofold. Number one, if in fact somebody has been bullied, in this hypothetical example, they may need to have something like an apology from the person who is doing the bullying in order to feel restored. Again, restorative practices, that's why they call it that. They may feel that they have lost something because perhaps they were embarrassed publicly as a result of the wrongdoing of another student. That needs to be addressed. It can't be just, well, it's not going to happen anymore. There are some feelings and some sensitivities which may have to be addressed that may not be addressed in a typical mediation. And also, when you use the word restored, if somebody has lost something like financially or their property's been damaged, there could be an element of restoring not only somebody emotionally, but financially, physically, as the case may be. It also relates to the wrongdoer. In this hypothetical, a wrongdoing student, to basically help restore them so that they can move forward without repeating the same types of offenses against the same student or other students as a growing exercise, as a maturity exercise, as they pass from junior high school to high school to out into the adult world. So much of what we learn in school is not just about textbooks, but about socialization and how to deal with people and how not to deal with people in certain instances. So restorative justice deals a little bit more, at least in my experience, in restorative practices, with the feelings and sensitivities of people, perhaps more so than a more traditional mediation. Not to say that couldn't come into a mediation session, but it doesn't always make it in the same fashion. So what happens with restorative justice, and this is why it's important for ESP professionals to become a bit aware of this in terms of potential opportunities. Restorative justice differs from mediation and other types of ADR, alternative dispute resolution, because it can involve additional individuals besides the people at issue, besides just student A and student B. As a matter of fact, a large part of restorative practices is based upon the premise that a wrong to one person is a wrong to the entire community. And the community has a vested interest in becoming involved, in trying to restore somebody who has been wronged, and also to move everybody ahead in a healthy manner, in an educational manner, quite frankly. And so as part of the restorative practices, which many involve themselves in, there is not only the individuals involved who were part of whatever the dispute was, but also a representative, or sometimes more than one representative, of the community, a community representative. In a school, a community representative who participates in a restorative practice, a forum, can be a teacher, it can be an administrator, it also can be an ESP professional. And in fact, as Felicia was pointing out before, as well as Ken, a lot of times things like bullying and wrongful conduct tend to take place in schools outside of the presence of teachers and administrators. They don't necessarily take place in a classroom when everyone's on their best behavior under the microscope of grades and things like that. They tend to happen when teachers aren't around, but ESP professionals may be around, such as in the cafeteria, such as on the school bus, such as out on the playground, such as out on the basketball court. And so an ESP professional who has an interest in becoming more involved with helping students can potentially, by learning about restorative practices and these 5 pillars, as well as other educational aspects of helping students in dispute resolution, can be a community representative in what they call a restorative justice circle. What's a restorative justice circle? Many times, and when you have a restorative practice forum, it's set up in a circle. It doesn't have to be in a circle, but very commonly it is. They call it basically a peace circle. This goes back based on long-term traditions and histories and cultures, things of that nature, where thousands of years ago, this is how things were done, and it's basically bringing that into the current times. So what that means is that people can sit around in a circle, including one or more community representatives, and try to address the issues which come up. For example, a huge part of restorative practices in many cases is the wrongdoer accepting responsibility for what they did, for basically stating that they did something wrong, acknowledging it, acknowledging the impact it may have had on the person who was wronged. They may not have even known that or thought about it until it got to a restorative justice circle. And then a restorative justice facilitator, somebody trained in restorative justice, as well as the community representatives, can help problem solve the issue. And there could be many ways to problem solve. But what studies show is that many times what is most important for a student who has been wronged by another student, or a person who's been wronged by another person, is basically for the person who committed the wrong to acknowledge the wrong, for there to be an opportunity, if the person who was wrong, to have a face-to-face discussion with the person who committed the wrong, to ask questions such as, why me? Why are you picking on me? Why did you understand how this made me feel? Basically, to get some things off their chest that might not otherwise happen in a different type of settlement process. You all must have seen at one point or another, when you see, by way of example, in a court system, when somebody has done something wrong, they're convicted of a crime, and then the victim or victim's family, they have the opportunity to give an impact statement. And whether the impact statement does or does not ultimately affect what the ultimate sentence is going to be, it's not necessarily the most important part of the opportunity for the victim impact statement. It's to give the victim and the victim's family an opportunity to say what they have bottled up, to state it to the court, or state it to another individual, and state it to a wrongdoer. And so in the context of school, there's an opportunity, if in fact the person who was victimized wants that opportunity, to have that opportunity, not to tell the person off or start another argument or anything like that, but to really basically start the healing process through talking and through creative, innovative ways of trying to determine what is the best way to restore what has been lost by the student. So ESP professionals have a tremendous opportunity and can be a tremendous resource to participate in these circles. And they could also potentially have been witnesses to certain events which took place. And they also potentially could be adult support systems for some of the students who perhaps need that or can benefit from that. There's so many ways in which ESP professionals can be involved in that type of process. I just want to indicate that another big part of restorative justice, in fact, one of the largest parts, is what takes place before you get to the restorative justice circle, before you get to the restorative practice forum, which generally means whoever is facilitating the restorative practice forum is meeting with both sides perhaps more than once on several occasions so that there are no surprises. It's sometimes very important for if a student has committed a wrong to another student, for that student to be willing to participate in the restorative practice circle or forum, and to be willing to admit what their wrongdoing was. If they're not willing to participate, you can't really force them to do that. If they're not willing to admit they did something wrong, then there may not be a lot of benefit from the restorative justice circle. There could be, but it could be much more difficult. And then you may have to take a look at more traditional avenues of discipline and punishment that don't always work so well, quite frankly, as far as studies show. So it's basically a field that is developing. It's been around for a little while, but it's become more and more popular really over the past decade. And if your school district does not already have restorative justice or restorative practices, it's something to look into and to discuss, and can really involve ESP professionals in a way that could be very beneficial to students, to the administration, to the ESP professionals, and to the community at large. And we have more information in the materials. And for those of you watching this on video, we have a set of written materials, downloadable materials, and anyone who wants to obtain those materials can obviously contact us and we can supply those as well. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to turn the mic over to Marv, who's going to give some comments about, he was listening to all of our conversation today about the 5 pillars, and then we'll be concluding with some wrap-up comments. Marv, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I apologize. I normally participate in giving presentations. I usually present about cognitive biases, but unfortunately I had a conflict while most of this was going on. But I'm happy that I have the opportunity to come in at the end and at least make a few comments about some of the things here. Just a little about my background. I've been a mediator for 20 years now. I mediate for the Superior Court in New Jersey. I mediate also for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and I also do family mediations. Actually, I see a number of familiar faces among the attendees here today. Many of you probably do know my wife, Francine Pfeffer. She's an associate director in government relations for NJEA. I'm sure many of you, if you're involved with NJEA, have heard her speak at one point or another. She's been doing that job for, I think, about 17 years at this point. And through that, I know a lot about educational issues. And on top of that, we have a 13-year-old son who is getting to live, unfortunately, all of the things that have been presented here today, issues on the bus, in the locker room, before and after PE, and so on. So, we do, unfortunately, have to live a lot of these things. And I know more so than maybe anybody else how ESPs are kind of the forgotten people in the education community. My wife spends a lot of time educating legislators in particular that it's not just teachers, it's educators. And all of you are really on the front lines of all these student interactions that my colleagues have talked about here today. So in many ways, you're among the most important people in terms of dispute resolution when it comes to students or students and yourself even. So I think it's important that you take to heart everything that's been said here today. And I just want to reiterate one thing that most of my colleagues have been talking about here today, which is how important having both conflict resolution skills as well as cultural competence is in today's education world. If you're able to do that, I think it makes your jobs easier. It makes you able to manage things a little bit better. What I tell all my students, I also teach mediation. What I tell all my students is that learning these skills will improve your quality of life, not just in terms of being a mediator, but in terms of whatever job that you have, your relations with your friends and your family. These skills, I think, are very important. But I also want to read, I think it was something that Anju had said, which is, that our society is becoming more and more diverse. And it's not just in the cities. I live in the suburbs, and we have a very, very diverse community here. And that diversity presents opportunities, but it also presents challenges, especially among children. So understanding some of those cultural issues and how they interact with other people, I think is very, very important. So I appreciate the time in being here today, and I'll turn it back over to Larry for what's next.
Thank you, Mark. As we move to conclude this program, there are a couple of questions I'd like to put out there for everybody to chime in on and see how you feel about it, because they relate to a lot of the things which we were talking about today. So my first question is, for ESP professionals who have an interest in moving forward and trying to learn more about how they could become more involved in dispute resolution, what type of things can be done? What do you think?
I think there's a few things that can be done. Getting people trained in conflict resolution skills. Doesn't necessarily need to be a mediator, but understanding how to better diffuse conflicts would be helpful. I know in the past there have been state grants that would allow for school districts to provide that sort of education, not only to ESPs, but to all educators. So I think that would be a pretty good first step forward.
Yeah, I have a couple of suggestions for ESPs to get involved with their schools. Every school should have a crisis intervention plan, and you as the staff need to learn how to sense and understand exactly what is happening in these situations to temper them and forestall their negative impact. And also, if your school doesn't have it, I would encourage your school, every school, to have an anonymous reporting system. I think it's really important to empower children to be able to stand up for themselves and others if they're victimized. That way they're keeping you, all the educators, in the loop on these important issues. We took a
Poll in one of our prior presentations from ESP practitioners who were present, an online poll about how they felt particularly about bullying. And a large amount of the people in attendance indicated that not only had they seen bullying taking place, but sometimes they felt bullied as well at the workplace. Any thoughts or feedback on that from anyone?
Well,
I think that's true. And I think we have to have funding to have someone in every school be the officer who handles all of these things and coordinates it and brings in other programs. This is great what we're doing, and a few people will be affected, but if there's no follow-up, nothing's going to happen. And it's all about funding ultimately. And each school should have, it's like having a compliance officer. In fact, in business, you need someone whose job it is to continue this.
Larry, in some schools, they do have an ombudsman, and if a teacher or a support expert is having a crisis, they can go in confidentially to that person. I think oftentimes when one person says they're bullied, other people are being bullied by that same person, and people keep quiet because they don't want to make waves. They're worried about their jobs. So it is up to the schools to develop ways that people can report these things confidentially and have it not come back to haunt them. But I think when people say they were bullied, that they're not the only victim of the bullying. And so it's important to say, when you see something, Ken said, say it. And I think we have to encourage that in the schools.
So basically, to have a structure in place that's proactive rather than simply reactive to whatever situation may develop in the future between any two persons. One final question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, cultural change doesn't just happen, right? Somebody has to take the lead on it, and it has to be implemented. So if you're going to have, the type of culture that rewards, respect and tolerance and appreciation for diversity, it's not going to happen automatically. It has to happen at the helm, and it has to be.
Very good point.
Well, what I think is that if you're going to break the cycle, you have to look at the person who is doing the bullying, that this is a form of communication. It's maladaptive or undesired behaviors. And we don't know a lot about what's going on in that person's mind. Were they being bullied at home? Was this learned behavior? Do they not know how to identify their feelings? And because if they can't express or identify when they're sad, when they're frustrated, if they can't do any of that, it all comes out as anger. And if we don't look at that, we can work with the victims, but if we're not looking at the people who keep doing the bullying and getting reinforced and going down that, they don't have a quality of life, and we don't know enough about it. So with utilizing the school resources like the guidance counselors, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the child study team, because we have to break the cycle. And if we're going to do that, we have to get to the people who are actually doing the bullying.
All excellent points. Last question I have before we conclude. Obviously, the overwhelming thrust of what we were talking about today is dispute resolution between students. However, a school being a community, there are very often times when there are disputes that don't just involve student versus student. There could be faculty member versus faculty member. There could be teacher's aide versus teacher. There could be faculty versus administrator. There could be all kinds of combination of disputes. We talked about these 5 foundational pillars, and I put this out to everyone here on the panel. Do these pillars also apply in those types of hypothetical disputes as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I do a lot of employment, mediation, and arbitration, and these kinds of disputes then end up in that arena. And then there's allegations of discrimination and harassment that violate the law against discrimination, the LAD in New Jersey. Also, the EEOC claims that Marv was talking about, federal claims. There's so many problems that escalate when things are not taken care of early on. So everything we're talking about with students also absolutely applies with adults, and that's all part of that culture. So, that permeates on every level. And that's part of what I was saying, where you want to be that model for the children. So you have to exemplify these positive, good qualities as well.
And just to add to that, a couple things. One, you don't get to choose your coworkers, right? You choose your friends, but you don't get to choose your coworkers. So if you think about it, the workplace, not just in schools, but everywhere, are a bunch of people who are sort of forced together. And if you don't realize it, you actually spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your own family in most jobs. So, sometimes, look, a lot of people get along, sometimes people don't. But when it's the core of your life, and for most people, that's what their job is, it really, if you're not having a good dynamic at work, it really creates a bad quality of life for yourself. And a lot of educational jobs are tenured, so people stay there for 20, 30 years, even longer. And I think it just creates a really bad issue when things don't go very well. So it's really important, I think, for people to speak up. I really think it's important for school administration to have programs in place to be able to deal with those sorts of disputes that come up. You know, I think it's just a very important thing. So,
Any final comments from anybody? We're all good?
My final comment would be that when you get to know the students and you notice any change in them, so, you know, report it to the teacher, the nurse, to whatever support there is, because when there's a change in behavior, there's usually something going on.
Good point.
I also like the fact that people can be a resource as just to listen. And, you know, on the first line, I thought that was a really important takeaway, is just open up and listen and give credence to the child.
You're right. It's an excellent point.
And to build on those, I would say, don't stand by and do nothing, because by being a bystander, you're actually doing something. You're passively encouraging that behavior. So, you know, that's what Ken was saying too. When you see something, say something, do something. So you have the power to do that. So when you turn your back on that child's, you know, that's sending a message. So if something feels wrong, then, you know, please intervene, because you can be a lifesaver.
I want to thank everyone who was listening to the program today for your time and attention. And on behalf of NJAPM, I want to thank Kean University, our partners in this three-part series. This was part 3. This was specifically the part dealing with ESPs, Education Support Professionals. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us. And the best of luck to everyone. Take care.